Right now, while you are listening to this, your phone is sitting somewhere within arm's reach. You know exactly where it is. You have probably checked it within the last 10 minutes. And if you have not checked it yet, you are thinking about checking it. That is not a coincidence. That is not a personal failing. That is the result of a $200 billion industry that has spent the last 15 years engineering your behavior with more precision than any marketing system in human history. The average person checks their phone approximately 96 times per day. That is once every 10 minutes during waking hours. The average person spends over 7 hours per day looking at screens, with more than half of that time spent on social media platforms. And here's the part that should concern you. When researchers ask people how much time they think they spend on their phones, the average estimate is about 2 hours per day. The actual number is more than 3 times higher. We are systematically unable to perceive how much of our lives we are giving away, because the systems we are giving it to have been optimized to make that loss invisible. For the next 24 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how the attention economy works, why the most profitable companies on earth make money by keeping you distracted, what is actually happening in your brain when you scroll, why every solution you have tried, app limits, grayscale mode, digital detoxes, fails within 3 weeks, what the real data shows about the mental health consequences of living inside these systems, and the 3 strategies that actually work for people who want to reclaim control without becoming a hermit who abandons all technology. This is not about morality. This is not about blaming you for being weak. This is about understanding a system that was deliberately built to be impossible to resist, and learning how to navigate it anyway. Let me start with the business model. Because once you understand how these companies make money, everything else makes sense. Social media platforms are free to use. You do not pay a subscription. You do not buy products directly from them. So how did Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, generate over $149 billion in revenue in 2024? How did Google, which owns YouTube, generate over $307 billion? How did TikTok, which did not exist before 2018, become one of the most valuable private companies on earth, with an estimated valuation exceeding $200 billion? The answer is simple. They sell your attention to advertisers. Not your data, although that is part of it. Your attention. Every second you spend looking at a screen is a second that can be monetized by showing you an advertisement. The entire business model is built on maximizing the amount of time you spend on the platform and the number of times you return to it throughout the day. That is why the feed never ends. That is why there is always one more video. That is why notifications are designed to pull you back in the moment you start to drift away. These platforms are not designed to inform you or connect you or entertain you. They are designed to hold your attention for as long as possible and convert that attention into advertising revenue. The math is brutal. Meta makes approximately $49 per user per year in North America. That number comes from dividing total advertising revenue by the number of active users. $49 per year per person? That might not sound like much, but it is enough to justify spending billions of dollars on engineering teams whose sole job is to optimize every pixel, every notification, every algorithm tweak to increase engagement by fractions of a percent. Because when you have 3 billion users, a fraction of a percent increase in engagement translates to billions in additional revenue. And here's the part that matters most. Engagement does not mean you are happy. Engagement does not mean you are learning something valuable. Engagement means you are looking at the screen. That is the metric. Time on site, scroll depth, return rate. The algorithm does not care if the content makes you anxious, angry, envious, or depressed. The algorithm cares if the content keeps you scrolling. And it turns out, and this is supported by every major study on the subject, the content that keeps people scrolling is not the content that makes them feel good. It is the content that triggers strong emotions. Outrage performs better than inspiration. Anxiety performs better than education. Envy performs better than celebration. The algorithm is not broken. The algorithm is working exactly as designed. Now let me show you what is happening in your brain when you use these platforms. Because the neuroscience is clear, and it explains why quitting is so hard, even when you know you should. Every time you get a notification, every time you see a new like, every time you pull to refresh and new content appears, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. It is the same chemical that gets released when you eat something sweet, when you win a game, when you accomplish a goal. It feels good, and your brain learns to associate the action, checking your phone with a reward. But here is where it gets dangerous. The dopamine is not released when you get the reward. It is released in anticipation of the reward. When you reach for your phone, your brain is already releasing dopamine before you even see what is on the screen, because your brain has learned that there might be something rewarding waiting for you. A new message, a new like, a video that makes you laugh. The possibility of a reward is enough to trigger the response. And the most addictive part of the entire system is that the reward is unpredictable. Sometimes you get a notification, sometimes you do not. Sometimes the video is interesting, sometimes it is boring. That variability, that uncertainty, is what makes it so hard to stop. This is called a variable reward schedule, and it is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You do not know when you're going to win, so you keep pulling the lever. Social media platforms have turned your phone into a slot machine that you carry in your pocket and check 96 times per day. And the platforms know this. The designers of these systems have publicly admitted that they built these features knowing they would be addictive. Former employees of Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok have gone on record saying that they designed notification systems, infinite scroll, and autoplay specifically to exploit psychological vulnerabilities and maximize engagement. This is not a conspiracy. This is documented, admitted strategy. So if the system is designed to be addictive, if the business model depends on keeping you distracted, if the neuroscience shows that your brain is being hijacked by variable reward schedules, why is it so hard to just stop using these platforms? Why do app limits fail? Why do digital detoxes last 3 days before you're back to scrolling? The reason is simple. You're not fighting against your own lack of willpower. You're fighting against a system that employs thousands of engineers, billions of dollars in infrastructure, and decades of behavioral psychology research. You are not weak. You're outmatched. App limits fail because the platform simply makes the content more engaging to compensate. You set a 30-minute limit on Instagram. Instagram responds by showing you more emotionally provocative content in those 30 minutes, so you get the same dopamine hit in less time. Grayscale mode fails because the content itself, not the colors, is what triggers the dopamine response. Digital detoxes fail because the moment you return, the algorithm floods you with notifications and recommended content to pull you back in. The platforms are adaptive. They learn from your behavior. They test thousands of variations of every feature to see which version keeps you engaged longer. And they update constantly. Every time you find a way to resist, the system evolves to close that gap. This is not a fair fight. And pretending it is a fair fight, pretending that the solution is just willpower or discipline, is why most people fail. Now, let me show you what the research actually says about the consequences of living inside these systems, because this is where the conversation gets serious. The data on social media and mental health is extensive, it is peer-reviewed, and it is increasingly clear. Heavy social media use, defined as more than 3 hours per day, is associated with significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and body image issues, particularly among adolescents and young adults. That association is not proof of causation, but the longitudinal studies that track the same people over time, show that increased social media use precedes the development of mental health symptoms, not the other way around. One of the largest studies, conducted by researchers at Stanford and published in 2023, followed over 10,000 adolescents for 5 years. The study found that teenagers who reduced their social media use from an average of 5 hours per day to 1 hour per day showed measurable improvements in self-reported happiness, reduced symptoms of depression, and better sleep quality within 6 weeks. The control group, who maintained their usual usage, showed no improvement. That is not correlation. That is an intervention study showing a causal relationship between reducing usage and improving mental health. The mechanisms are well understood. Social comparison is constant on these platforms. You see curated highlights of other people's lives, their vacations, their relationships, their achievements, and your brain compares your internal reality to their external performance. That comparison is unfair and distorted, but it happens automatically. The result is a persistent sense of inadequacy. You are not successful enough. You are not attractive enough. You are not interesting enough. The platforms know this. They know that envy drives engagement, and they optimize for it. Sleep disruption is another major factor. The blue light emitted by screens suppresses melatonin production, making it harder to fall asleep. But more importantly, the content itself is stimulating. Scrolling through TikTok or Instagram before bed keeps your brain in an activated state when it should be winding down. Studies show that people who use their phones within 1 hour of bedtime take significantly longer to fall asleep and report lower sleep quality. Poor sleep compounds every other mental health issue. It makes you more anxious, more irritable, more prone to depression. And the next day, when you are tired, you are more likely to seek easy dopamine hits, which means more scrolling. It is a reinforcing cycle. Let me address the counter-argument directly, because there is a version of this conversation that is dishonest, and I want to avoid it. The counter-argument is that social media also provides real value. It connects people across distances. It gives marginalized communities a platform. It spreads information quickly. It creates economic opportunities for creators and small businesses. All of that is true. Social media is not purely destructive. The problem is not that these platforms have no value. The problem is that the value they provide comes bundled with costs that most people do not see until they are already paying them. The better question is not whether social media is good or bad. The better question is whether the amount of value you personally extract from these platforms justifies the amount of attention, mental energy, and time you're giving them. For some people, the answer is yes. Creators who make a living from YouTube or Instagram, people who use these platforms strategically to build businesses or maintain long-distance relationships, people who have the discipline to use these tools without being used by them. But for most people, the honest answer is no. Most people are not getting $49 worth of value per year from Meta. They are giving $49 worth of attention and getting back anxiety, distraction, and a vague sense that they are wasting their lives. So what actually works? If willpower fails, if app limits fail, if detoxes fail, what are the strategies that let you reclaim control without abandoning technology entirely? The first strategy is friction. The platforms are designed to be frictionless. One tap, and you are in the app. One swipe, and you are scrolling. The content loads instantly. Notifications pull you back automatically. The entire system is optimized to eliminate any barrier between the impulse to check and the act of checking. The way you fight that is by deliberately adding friction back into the process. Delete the apps from your phone and only access them through a web browser on a computer. That single step, requiring you to physically sit down at a computer to check Instagram, will reduce your usage by 50% or more within the first week. It is not that you do not want to check. It is that the effort required to check is now high enough that the impulse fades before you act on it. Log out of your accounts after every session. Require yourself to manually type in your password every time you want to access the platform. That 15-second delay is enough to interrupt the automatic behavior and force a conscious decision. Most of the time, you will decide it is not worth the effort. Turn off all notifications, not just the ones you think are distracting. All of them. Notifications are not a service the platform provides to you. Notifications are a tool the platform uses to control your behavior. Every notification is an interruption designed to pull you back into the app. Eliminating them does not mean you miss important information. It means you check on your own schedule instead of theirs. The second strategy is substitution. You cannot eliminate a habit by willpower alone. You have to replace it with something else that satisfies the same underlying need. The reason you scroll is not because you love scrolling. It is because you are bored or anxious or avoiding something uncomfortable. Scrolling is easy. It requires no effort. It fills time, and it provides a small, predictable dopamine hit. If you want to stop scrolling, you need to identify what need it is satisfying and find a better way to meet that need. If you scroll when you're bored, have a book ready or a podcast queued. If you scroll when you are anxious, learn a basic breathing exercise or take a walk. If you scroll to avoid work, acknowledge the avoidance and set a timer for 5 minutes of focused effort. The goal is not to eliminate the impulse. The goal is to redirect it towards something that actually improves your life instead of degrading it. The third strategy is accountability. Most people fail at behavior change because they try to do it alone. They set private goals that no one else knows about and then quietly give up when they fail. The way you fight that is by making your commitment public and measurable. Tell someone you trust that you are reducing your social media use and ask them to check in with you weekly. Use screen time tracking and share the numbers with that person. Knowing that someone else will see your usage makes you more accountable to your own goals. Join a group or community of people who are also trying to reduce their usage. The shared experience creates social proof and makes the behavior change feel normal instead of isolating. Now let me talk about the version of this that almost no one is willing to say out loud, but that is true and important. You are probably not going to quit social media entirely, and that is fine. The goal is not purity. The goal is not to become a digital minimalist who lives off the grid and only communicates by handwritten letters. The goal is to use these tools intentionally instead of being used by them. To check Instagram because you want to, not because the notification pulled you in. To scroll for 10 minutes because you have 10 minutes to kill, not for 2 hours, because the algorithm kept you hooked. The mental shift required is understanding that your attention is the most valuable resource you have. It is more valuable than your money because money can be earned back. Attention, once spent, is gone forever. Every hour you spend scrolling is an hour you did not spend reading, learning, building something, connecting with someone in person, or even just sitting quietly with your own thoughts. The opportunity cost is enormous, and the platforms know this. They are competing for your attention against every other possible use of your time. And they are winning because they have spent billions of dollars making sure they win. The people who build wealth, who create meaningful work, who maintain deep relationships, who feel satisfied with their lives, are not necessarily smarter or more disciplined than you. They are the people who figured out how to protect their attention from systems designed to steal it. They use their phones as tools instead of letting their phones use them as products. And the gap between those two groups is not shrinking. It is widening, because the platforms are getting better at what they do every single day. Here is what I want you to take away from this. Social media is not evil. The algorithms are not malicious. The engineers who built these systems are not cartoon villains. They are people solving an optimization problem. And the problem they were asked to solve was how to maximize engagement and advertising revenue. They solved that problem brilliantly. The fact that the solution happens to exploit psychological vulnerabilities and degrade mental health is not a bug. It is the inevitable consequence of optimizing for the wrong metric. You're not powerless, but you are also not fighting a fair fight. Recognizing that the system is designed to beat you is the first step toward designing your own counter-strategy. Add friction, substitute better habits, build accountability, protect your attention like it is worth $200 billion. Because to the platforms, it is. The next decade will be defined by who controls attention. The people who learn to protect theirs will have time to think, create, build, and connect. The people who do not will spend that same decade scrolling through other people's lives and wondering where their own time went. That is not a moral judgment. It is a prediction based on incentives, systems, and human psychology. I will continue tracking developments in attention economics, digital wellness research, and practical strategies for navigating these systems. And I will bring you analysis that is honest, evidence-based, and actionable. Subscribe. Share this with someone who feels like they are losing control. And I will see you in the next one.